And heirloom seeds have more nutrition. But they're called inferior, they're called primitive. They're called backward. And there's only this description that has wiped them out, not because they did not give us nourishment. So this report we did, we calculated nutrition per acre. Farmers who have their own seeds, who grow diversity, have so much more production of nutrition, which matters, that we could feed to Indians if we just saved seeds and grew them out ecologically for the crop. Having reduced the nutrition, I'll just give you, we did a study of 200 of our seed savers who are organic farmers. And I'll just give you two nutrients, and this was an average calculated. So carotene is the vitamin A precursor. And average carotene on our biodiverse farms with native seeds is 3,000 milligrams per acre. And in a chemical monoculture with the so-called high-yielding varieties, 450. Can you imagine? Yeah? So instead of just saving seeds, growing crops, doing organic farming, which would increase your availability of carotene, what are they offering for 20 pathetic years? I talked about dumbness, and I talked about stupidity. It has to be stupidity to try and make rice produce carotene, which they call golden rice. They call it golden rice. It has 80 patents. It's not yet reached performance level. Agronomically, it's not doing well enough. But even if they were to be successful, other crops can give us 350% more, just like that. Iron. With our native seeds and organic farming, there's 29 grams of iron per acre compared to the chemical monocultures, which is 11. So more than twice. Rather than just solve the problem of iron by growing diversity, what do they want to do? They try to introduce genetically engineered banana. Now banana is very good in potassium. We call it the culprit, the all-giving food. But it's not the richest source of iron, so if we're going to increase iron, they said we'll increase it 5-fold. It has 0.22 microgram. They'd increase it to 2. Our turmeric, I know you're going crazy over turmeric these days, Well, my ancestors knew long ago how good it is. Turmeric, 7,000% more than a GMO banana would ever give you. So by forgetting diversity, we are forgetting the options we have. And with it is an extrapolation of the idea that led to colonialism. The idea that if a land is not externally controlled by a colonizer, it is empty. It was terra nullius. Our lands were called empty. Australia was called empty because we were defined as not fully human. Because we weren't white, we weren't Christians, and we weren't violent. We're just primitive. To be human as part of the earth, to care for other beings, including other human beings, that's primitiveness. So I say celebrate the primitive seed, let's celebrate the primitive human being. So what's happening to the seed, besides the fact we had a fraud green revolution which destroyed my land, Punjab. I wrote a book called The Violence of the Green Revolution on that. Bill Gates is trying to take it to Africa, called the Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa. We've had 20 years of a failed genetically engineered miracle. They were supposed to control pests. with the Bt crops and weeds, with the Roundup Ready crops. What do we have? With Bt crops, we have super resistant bollworm, and we have new pests we've never had in cotton. The white fly, the aphids, the jasses, the army bug, the mealy bug. You know, we've got a diversity of bugs, not a diversity of cotton anymore. And in terms of Roundup resistance, half the farmlands of this country are overtaken by superweeds. So there are two new disasters to rescue this failed technology. The first disaster is they added the dicamba resistance, and you know everywhere what the dicamba drift is doing. But for me, the even more serious threat is people like Bill Gates and others have forgotten that life that is self-organized is self-organized in complexity. And that self-organized complexity is in every seed, and it's in us. So having ignored diversity, having ignored the damage of chemicals, we now have disease epidemics. And the disease epidemics are related to the fact that we as human beings are only 10% human cells. We are 90% bacteria and microorganisms in our gut, which is now being called the microbiome. Our science of health, our science of nutrition, Ayurveda, the science of life, always said without diversity you can't have health. Diversity is not a luxury. You can't take the same GM soya and modulate it into 30 things, because we might be stupid enough to not recognize that it's the same thing. The sensors in our gut know the difference. And because the sensors in our gut know the difference, and they need diversity, the lack of diversity is becoming a major source of disease. And then the toxics are another major source of disease. But of course, the tragedy is that the same industry, right now we are being governed by a cartel of three. Cartel of three. Sadly, they're the ones who bring us poisons, they're the ones who bring us GMOs, they're the ones who destroy our seed diversity, and when people get cancer, they're the ones who own the patented cancer drugs. So for them, it's a wonderful market. You know, the more people fall sick, the more their profits. For us, the measure is well-being. The well-being of the earth, the well-being of every species, and the well-being of our children. That well-being is also based on the right of every species to exist. When His Holiness' 60th birthday was taking place, I think that's 20 years ago, I was asked to speak on his birthday celebration in a big hall, and I talked about patenting, and I talked about GMOs. And he scribbled a note to me in Tibetan, which said, every being has a right to happiness. No being has a right to take away anyone's happiness. And he was talking about beings in terms of the beings that sit here. And the fact that these plants don't walk, or at this point they're not growing, doesn't mean they are inert and dead. They are holding their future growth as potential. You know, my PhD is on quantum theory, on non-separability and potential. That's all the world is, that we are related. That's non-separability. And that we are all potential, including the potential in each seed, which seems to be latent, but is just holding its energy for the next generation, and the next generation, and the next generation, as long as it gets the care. The opposite of this, thinking of timelessness, of permanence, of dynamic evolution, is the fear of life. And having created superweeds in the Roundup Ready farms, there is now an attempt to basically exterminate species. So in the Roundup Ready fields, there is now a major problem with a sacred plant It's sacred to us, sacred to the Mexicans, called the amaranth. Amaranth is derived from amar, which means forever. We eat the amaranth as a sacred food. The Mexicans, it was banned by the Spanish because it was a sacred food. It was made illegal in that time. Right now, you have Bill Gates. I have a favorite company called Monsanto, and I'm having a favorite person now called Bill Gates. He's kind of evolving into that category. And the new technologies they're trying to push, people like Gates, having failed with genetic engineering based on reductionist mechanistic thought, that seeds are a machine, life is a machine, all we have to do is engineer it. Poor Bill Gates, who patented software, thinks life is cut and paste. It's a word program. And so he's pushing all the research on this thing called CRISPR, which is called gene editing. It will edit a plant. We'll edit life. And they're going to the next step, which is basically gene drives, which are an extermination system. Now, of course, because life is not a word program, it's interrelated, there's complexity. In an early CRISPR program, they found 1,000 off-target impacts. You're trying to edit this little piece, and 1,000 places things are changing in the organism. But we knew, even with genetic engineering of Roundup Ready and Bt, that things were changing, which there was denial of. There was such huge denial of the basis of life, science of life, and the science of self-organizing. So Bill Gates has joined with the defense research called DARPA on gene drives, and the first thing they want to turn extinct is the Parma amaranth. This is what their study says. We create gene drives in Parma amaranth to reduce or eliminate the weed in agricultural fields. And then there's a little footnote saying, impact? Well, in India they do eat it. Little food security impact. Of course, the point is it will never work, because just like their genetic engineering of herbicide resistance, which denied the evolutionary potential of weeds, has led to super weeds, gene editing and gene drives will allow, and this is predicted, and in some research is showing, will allow evolution of resistance in the very entities you want to push to extinction. Because life, like the seed, goes on. And because life goes on, that's where our work comes in. And the two things we must not do is panic because of climate change, and panic because of the power of the cartel of three. We've got to cultivate hope, we've got to cultivate joy. And all we have to remember is the seeds of the future lie in the seeds of the past that we protect. Thank you. The most compelling argument is it's failed. We can't put the future in a failed technology that didn't even last 20 years. These seeds have lasted, we don't know how many thousands of years. So the failure is the first. Second is all GMOs are married to toxins. They're basically poison-producing plants. Whether it is Bt toxin being expressed in the Bt crops, or the glyphosate resistance in the Roundup Ready crops. Now you're eating that. There's research done in Canada that pregnant women and the fetus had the Bt toxin surviving, even though Monsanto said it degrades. A cartel of 3 that only knows how to kill. They don't know anything else. They don't know how to grow anything. They don't know how to let things flourish. All they know is how to kill first human beings, now other beings. And when I mentioned exterminating the amaranth, I was pointing to that will to destroy, to kill. And what we need is the will to grow, to save, exchange, flourish. That will not come through the GMOs. That will come through freedom seeds, open pollinated seeds, heirloom seeds. You can refer to them in many, many ways, but they are where the freedom of life is, and where the freedom of the grower is, and the freedom from the cartel is.